What they do, all of my gram addicts. This is Orion, aka Brass Balls. Of course, you knew that you're on my YouTube page or you are on my fucking Instagram page. Why do I keep doing this introduction? I don't know. But here we are again, and this is another tape cassette gem. This is Kwest the Mad Lad, and it's called What's the Reaction? Now, as you may have guessed by now, this is not coming from my own personal stash. This is from the homie, the brother, the great old head Ed. What they do, homie.
Yeah. What up, peoples? Yo, I'm glad to be invited on to the Brass Balls '09 Instagram and the YouTube channel.
Listen, man, you're here for a reason. It's because you are a hip-hop connoisseur, you know your shit, and you have an incredible collection that we've already dived into. But we're about to dive into this joint right here. So let's get into it. Tell me about this tape cassette. What do you remember? Do you remember where you copped it from? All that good shit.
Bro, I remember good times. This was at the height of me like really finding my way through hip hop. And at this point, I had a little bit of money. I was working a job at the 163rd Street Mall. And I was able to put together some money to be able to afford, a couple little things. So I was at at work or just after work or maybe just after picking up a paycheck at the mall. And what else do you do but spend the paycheck on some music if you're a hip hop fan? And I remember going over and picking up this single over at Specs. And I was hesitant at first because the term Quest was solely
a tribe.
A tribe, yes, exactly. Yeah. But through one of the heads that was chilling with me was like, no, this is actually pretty dope. You got to check it out. I was messing with the aesthetic of the album, Kwest the Mad Lad. I'm like, all right, let me get into it. And so that's where I copped it. And I was not disappointed. Bro. Dope from the beginning, where you start hearing the homage, what I would consider a homage to those before you, when you start using samples. With the
EPMD sample.
EPMD, please listen to my demo.
The Buster reaction.
And the Buster reaction, and then yeah, man. So I was like, okay, so this cat understands what I'm looking for in a production, and yeah, man, they nailed it.
One of the things that you just said right now was 163rd Street Mall, and I was about to ask you, and you already said you got it from the Specs there. But for those that don't know, North Miami, in that area of 163rd Street Mall, had Blue Note Records, Peaches, and the Specs,
and then Coconuts. If you went further west towards the Golden Glades, you'd end up at Coconuts, which was off of 167th and Northeast 2nd Ave.
So with getting the tape cassette, that was something, especially with these tape cassette singles, is where, especially in those days, you could take a chance on an artist because you weren't breaking the bank. It wasn't such a commitment.
Yeah.
And here you are, you got this, which is an incredible joint off the album. Yeah. I actually copped the whole album. I got lucky and copped it because it's a rare album to have the actual album of it. Yeah. And it was one of the promotional only albums. It's not snippets, it's the full album.
Okay.
Kwest was signed to American Records, which is also the home label for Chino XL. Now, the difference between the two is that with Kwest, his album was actually executive produced by Rick Rubin. Rick Rubin was, I believe, the CEO of American Records.
Wow.
And to have Rick Rubin stamp your album like that meant a lot.
Yeah.
I'm surprised the album didn't take off because it has joints.
Okay.
But all the production, for the most part, is great, but unknown cats. I mean, the Baka Boys is probably the most known cats on the production tip on that album, and that's just because they were LA DJs. But even this song, What's the Reaction, was produced by Dan Chadnas.
Oh, the Baker Boys.
The Baker Boys.
The Baker Boys.
Not the Baka Boys.
Nick B and LKK, yeah.
So they produced, I think, a handful of songs on it. But this particular song, What's the Reaction, was produced by Dan Chadnas.
Okay.
And I don't know much. I don't got my Discogs in front of me.
Yeah.
But forgive me, folks. I know I usually do that research beforehand, but we flying off the cuff today.
For real.
It's nothing but good times. Something that I noticed on the liner notes of the tape that you just presented that I never knew was cuts by DJ Homicide. And DJ Homicide is the DJ that's with Sugar Ray.
That makes sense. Okay, because I'm trying to paste
Yeah.
the name. I'm like, yo, the name sounds familiar as hell. Yo, okay,
Yeah.
got you. Yeah, that's Sugar Ray. The one that, yeah. Yeah, that's Sugar Ray.
1459, I think was their album. I don't know. But yeah, man, Kwest the Mad Lad was, you brought up a good point in that his voice tonality is very similar to Fat Lip
Word.
of the Far Side.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
even with me reading the liner notes, I wasn't familiar with Kwest the Mad Lad until I copped his album. And with me reading the liner notes and seeing the Baker Boys, I was just like, is this guy from LA? Like, it didn't hit me till MySpace era or whatever.
Yeah.
That I found him and I'm like, did more history on him. I'm like, oh no, he's from New York.
Bro, and there's a gap between when this single dropped, which had to be early 90s or early to mid 90s, and then when MySpace hit. Like, there's definitely a gap between time. But it's dope to see that it still had a relevancy even at the point where the MySpace was the thing.
I think the album that this song was featured on ended up getting shelved or something, but these days it don't matter, folks. It's up on YouTube. It's up, I believe it's out on Spotify. And he had an album that he released sometime after this, just of like unreleased joints and stuff that are fire.
Okay.
Kwest the Mad Lad was definitely a part of the whole lyricist lounge movement. Thurston
right.
Howe, Wordsworth, that whole era. He's very much a big part of that. I think he even took part in some kind of like battle league where like him, Wordsworth, Thurston, and Eminem were all teamed up. I might be wrong on those details, but you know, hey, it is what it is.
Yeah.
I hope y'all enjoyed this one. Make sure you go peep Old Head Ed on his many podcast adventures, Brews, Beats, and Eats, Beer Pressure, and Barcodes, the podcast. Make sure you go peep that on all the streaming platforms. I am Orion, aka Brass Balls. Check me out on YouTube. Subscribe, repost, comment, all that. Orion Hip Hop is my channel. Hope y'all enjoyed another episode.
Yo, we out here.
Peace.